This is Suzanne Wagner, and I am doing my blog for the 8th of January 2023. This blog, I'm continuing my theme because everybody seems to be interested about navigating New York and playing the New York City ballerina. Once I got to New York City, I fortunately had other dancers from Dallas that I knew that were either going to SAB or other schools such as Joffrey Ballet or American Ballet Theater. Those at other schools were often staying in other areas because Manhattan is a really large place. I was in the Upper West Side by Central Park, but ABT was in the Flatiron District below Midtown Manhattan and above Lower Manhattan. Joffrey Ballet was in Greenwich Village. So while those two were close together and those dancers could hang out a lot with each other, my group was much further up the island. When I got there, my father had my Uncle Philip meet me at the airport and take me in a cab to the city. He was living over in the East Village, so he was quite a ways away from me. He got me to the Empire Hotel and said, "I will let you unpack and then I will be back in an hour to take you for dinner." The hotel was nice enough and it seemed safe, but I was a young dancer that had just come from Texas and not very savvy to the city life or ways. About an hour later, someone knocks on the door and I open it, expecting it to be my uncle. There he is, standing in the doorway, and he starts yelling at me. "Don't you ever open a door without first asking who it is. What is wrong with you? You are in New York City. I could have been anybody." I was startled, but I got the message. I am not in Texas anymore. I am in the big city, and there are dangers here that I had to learn to be more aware of. He was right. He knew. He was born and raised in Brooklyn and was now living in the city for years, and my naive ways needed to be put aside. It was a time to err on the side of caution. It was summer, and I had opened my windows to let some fresh air, there's a joke, in because it was much muggier back east than in Texas. We had dinner, and when I got back to my room, to my shock, my room was filled with pigeons. Seems that one does not open windows in the city without getting unexpected guests. Needless to say, it took me a while to get them out. I was too embarrassed to tell the hotel staff of my mistake, but after cleaning up pigeon poop off the bed and the floor, I went to sleep, excited and scared to see what would happen next. Many ask me how my father would let me at 15 years old to go to New York City by myself. The answer is simple. I was a goody two-shoes. I never did anything wrong. I was meticulous and fastidious. I was smart, alert, and most of the time careful. I did what I was told, and I knew if I screwed anything up, I would be sent home immediately. I knew my father would look for any excuse to get me away from ballet and to get me to come to my senses and see everything from his perspective. My sister had showed me what not to do. She loved to resist the rules, and I could easily see how that got her nowhere but in trouble and grounded. But my parents were fair. If I showed good common sense and acted accordingly to the rules and requirements, they trusted me. Besides, my dad was raised in Brooklyn, and while he was not a fan of New York, he knew I did have family close by if anything happened. Philip was there, and my Uncle Ray was on Long Island, so there were others to help if needed. The next day, I tried to get a lay of the land. I wanted to know where I was in relation to others. I quickly realized that I was not going to be seeing most of the other dancers because of the schedules and the distance. On many levels, I felt very on my own. The first day at SAB, I woke up early and spent 3 hours making my hair into the perfect New York City Ballet French twist. It was the signature of all the SAB dancers, a must-have if you were going to fit in. If you are wondering how crazy and neurotic one has to be to do their hair over and over again for 3 hours, the answer is that in my brain, first impressions mattered a lot, and going to the school that first day is like dealing with the sorting hat at Hogwarts. You start at your age group and take a class. Then you begin sorting your skill level, and eventually you end up in your groups. In the summer sessions, the classes were numbered 3, 4, 5, 6. The number 6 was the top level of the summer programs and usually reserved for seniors. In the yearly groups, they were lettered and numbered, such as B1, B2, C1, C2, and D. The D level was the level one got accepted into right before you got accepted into the apprenticeship program for the company, hopefully. Age-wise, they put me in the 4 group, and they kept me there, which was fine by me. There was so much new, and I wanted to feel slightly comfortable in the discomfort of this adventure. At least I was surrounded by girls my age and skill level. Back then at the school, I wore matching leotards and skirts. The skirts I made myself. That was allowed back then, and it helped me feel my own style and flow. The teachers in my day were Alexandra Danilova, Irina Kozmovska, Andrei Kramerovsky, Filia Dubrovska, Suki Shore, Stanley Williams, and Antonio Tumkovsky. There were others, but some names, for some reason, are more difficult for me to retrieve. As you can see by the names, many of them were Russian. I loved the Russian teachers. They were all characters and had their particular ways, but they knew how to inspire and motivate students. My first class with Tumkovsky was a stunning lesson in abject control, or should I say, my lack of it. Needless to say, I felt like I was wobbling all over the place. Her classes were all ridiculously difficult and required a degree of core stability to move around one leg down and the other off the ground in a multitude of positions. She was the kindest of person. She had been a ballerina during World War II. She was captured by the Nazis and they decided to break her knees. When she finally got her knees fixed in the 1980s, I cried hearing how she was showing and dancing the steps finally in class. It was as if a butterfly had reclaimed her wings. She was the sylph ballerina getting her life and wings back. But when I knew her, she could barely walk and always had a cane to support her. She would beautifully express what she wanted in stilted, broken English and the use of her hands and the pounding of her cane on the wood floor. You had to pay attention because often she would say the exercise once. Then the music would start and she would sit down, pound her cane, saying the steps to the beat of the music. Everyone loved her. She challenged us in ridiculous ways and loved us ferociously. She was so genuine, sincere, focused, and a powerhouse of torturous combinations that would test the most talented of dancers. Alexandra Danilova was a diva through and through. She demanded extreme turnout from the feet and often did not care if your knees were being twisted. Before she would come into class, we, the dancers, would do caricatures of her because she was the epitome of the demanding, extreme Russian teacher. She carried her purse as if she was carrying a bouquet of flowers across the room. She demanded attention and wore beautiful necklaces and earrings to adorn her beautifully made-up face. She walked like a ballerina and carried herself in the manner of a woman that demanded respect. She was, after all, a prima ballerina, and she made sure that every facade, that facade never broke. Stanley Williams was the boss. He had more power than any other teacher. Not only was he a choreographer, but he was the one that had Balanchine's ear. One did not want to screw up in Stanley's class. Mistakes would get back to those in charge and those that made the big decisions. His classes were so quiet you could hear a pin drop. No one spoke and no one questioned his methods or ways. He was God, and everyone knew it. With Tumkovsky, you could groan when she gave a seemingly impossible combination, and she would just smile, pound her stick into the ground, delighted at her ingenuity and the challenge that she had placed on each of us. Perfection in her class was earned through hard work, extreme effort, dedication, and determination. Mistakes, they were a part of that journey. She would insist that you could do better. But with Stanley, you didn't dare make a squeak of disdain, despair, or frustration. No huffing and puffing. Elegance and grace were required even in falling. His classes for the men would end up having the most amazing principal dancers taking them along with the students. It was not uncommon in the highest men's class to see Peter Martins, Peter Shofas, Mikhail Berezhnikov, and Rudolf Nureyev all together in the class. Every girl would be trying to poke her head or eyes in the doorway. Such moments were a game where powerful, talented men subtly competed with each other. It was amazing to see such a magnificent chess match of understated elegance with playful banter mixed with respect for the grande dame, Nureyev. Peter Martin's was elongated elegance, finesse, and charisma. He moved like a panther with grace and finesse. Peter Schofi's was a powerhouse of spins and perfect placement, jumps that could seem to fly, and muscles in his shorter and more stocky frame that showed the power of a coiled spring inside. Mikhail Baryshnikov was playful, sincere, in competition with himself and no one else. He was a gentleman, respected, kind-hearted, and generous. A study in technique and placement, and a boyish smile that would melt the hearts of every girl in the vicinity. He and Rudy would bounce off each other. Each knew what the other had as far as talent and skill. Each respected the other, but the winning ego was always Rudolf Nureyev. Rudy had to win in any game of competition. It was how he was built. As a student, he started late, and because of that, his ferocious determination was what made him, and it became a part of his personality. I often think, after knowing him better, after I got to Berlin, that I think that Tartar passion from his birth was there from the very beginning, and it would never leave him in this life. Rudy would command the final group in a sequence doing an exercise, and the other men allowed him to have that prestigious position. No one challenged him out of respect and great admiration for what he had accomplished in leaving the USSR and the tremendous gifts that his talent inspired in the West. While Baryshnikov was classy, caring, and consistent, Nureyev was a storm of emotion, power, intensity, drama, arrogance, and reactivity. He was a wild animal that could barely control the emotions that cascaded through his being. To me, he was the Tartar version of the Shambhanama, or the trickster of the Persian mythology, where the boundaries that the world held would be the places that one would find him. Sometimes he would aggressively draw the line. Sometimes he would blatantly and arrogantly cross the line. Sometimes it humored him to erase the line completely. Other moments he relished moving that line and making everyone panic as they tried to accommodate him. I saw him even then as a god on the thresholds. He defied limits in himself and others. He refused to back away from a challenge. To me, even at 15 years old, he was something between a coiled snake and a roaring lion. Watching such moments in dance, one learns about the protocols and subtle structures that rule ballet and the ballet class, and that rule the patterns within a rehearsal. That first year in New York massively opened my eyes to another world that I thought I knew, but in truth was just beginning to put my big toe into the artistic waters of the much greater world of theater. Theater is a living, breathing reflection of how humans strive for greatness and can monumentally fail. The beauty of the theater in its imperfections. It longs to create beauty and inspiration for those wallowing in mediocrity. It shows a potential for mankind through discipline and structure. It longs for deeper expression of emotions in a world that tries to suppress them. It shows a wild abandon that is not allowed in society. It shows the trauma of loss and the ultimate journey to forgiveness and grace. It wants a happy ending, but that ending is often only uncovered when the characters are willing to surrender and lovingly go through the pain of life and loss. It is an honest mirror of who we really are. It is its own muse. To me, dance and theater is the teacher of all the most essential things in life that carry us beyond the mundane and into the hidden worlds of magic. Thanks, everyone.